Jason to give me a thumbs up that they're recording, and then I'll start. That way we don't have to do the introduction to for the Westminster people. Good to go?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Just drink like a half of a tea, so I'm like.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. If you would grab some chairs and settle in. I wanted to thank you so much for coming, for starters. I want to also just briefly apologize for the venue being not the normal venue that we use in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, that was booked for tonight, so we had to move it over here. We did a search, and this was the best one we could come up with. It's a great venue. It's beautiful, but not as proximate to where we wanted to be as we'd like. But here we are, and we'll make the best of it. I would like to take just 1 second to acknowledge Councilmember Gallo. Thank you so much for coming, Councilmember, and if you'd like to say something.
I just want to welcome everyone to a different part of District 10. I think most of our meetings for the Grove have been a little bit closer to the Grove. So the Board of Realtors, we always want to thank for sharing this location with us. It's become a really good community facility to be able to have meetings, and the parking is great and it's easy to get to, so we really do appreciate that, and thank you to the board. I know Andre is outside with his cute little boy, so if you can hear me, Andre, there you are. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here this evening. You know, we've tried in our office to help make information about this project available to the public. We have a weekly newsletter that we try to keep updates in, and so we really appreciate. You can choose to spend your time in many ways, and we really do appreciate the fact that you've chosen to be here tonight to listen to this presentation. It also gives you an opportunity to ask questions. The Bull Creek Road Coalition is a group of representatives from the different neighborhood organizations that are close to the Grove, and I would love to acknowledge those representatives if they are here. If you're a Bull Creek Road, would you like to introduce yourself and say your title and what neighborhood you represent? Okay. Any other representatives from the board, from the Bull Creek Road Coalition board? Oh, Bob. Yes, thank you. You're right in front of me. I'm sorry. I'm nursing a cold or something. I'm a little foggy. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so we have two of the, Sarah, what do we have? 7 representatives on the board, so we appreciate the 2 representatives being here tonight with us, and we thank everyone else, so appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gallo. Okay, well, I am going to jump right in and just say a few brief words right off the bat. Then I'm going to introduce Robert Deegan on our design team to walk through the master plan, and then I'll introduce Brian Williams, our engineer, and he will walk through some traffic information, and then we'll have quite a bit of time after that for question and answer. Okay, so more than 15 months ago, I stood in front of a group much like this and made a commitment and a request. I committed to approaching this process with honesty, integrity, a sense of purpose in creating the very best community possible, and a sense of compromise. I asked everyone else involved in the process to do the same. I want to thank those of you that have chosen to engage in the process adhering to those ideals. As we move through the rest of this process, we remain committed to those same ideals, and we would ask you to do similarly. Over the past 15 months, we have been working to improve the proposed conceptual master plan based on input from various experts and neighborhood resources. The input has resulted in substantial changes to the master plan, including the addition of a green belt on the northern part of the project, additional parkland, a substantial reconfiguration of the for-sale residential portion of the project outside of the commercial mixed-use area, as well as some substantial changes to the commercial portion of the project that will improve flow, access, and parking, not to mention a bridge across Shoal Creek. We held a parkland planning meeting, bicycle connectivity meeting, as well as residential planning meeting that were all well attended with between 70 and 150 attendees each. All told, we've had more than 50 meetings with various neighborhood groups and greatly appreciate your involvement in those discussions. Most recently, we have engaged a facilitator to help promote productive dialogue with the BCRC in an effort to find common ground on issues where we still are divided. Today, Robert Deegan from our design team is going to walk through the above-mentioned changes to the master plan. We'll also spend a fair amount of time detailing the traffic impacts on the roadway surrounding the project. We'll include a detailed discussion of the improvements that we'll be making to the roadway and the impact those improvements will have, which will be a very positive and productive impact, lowering wait times and reducing congestion within the roadway network surrounding the project. At the end of the presentation, please feel free to submit via the white comment cards that are being passed out by Sam Meeker. Submit any questions that you may have, and we will answer those questions. We're going to actually ask for a few member volunteers from the audience to come up and help us organize those questions so that they are organized into sort of question areas, but to also ensure that all of the questions get answered. Some of them will be redundant. That's what we've done in prior presentations, but we'd love some help from someone in the neighborhood that's willing to help us out with that. So without any further ado, let's jump into the master plan. Robert, take us through it.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm Robert Deegan with Norris Design, one of the principal planners on the project. As Garrett mentioned, my job tonight is to present to you the updated master plan for the Grove at Shoal Creek. So let's jump right in. You see here a new conceptual bird's eye of the updated master plan. This view looks southwest across Shoal Creek and a new bridge into the project, over the large signature park, the vibrant mixed-use district, and the diverse residential district surrounding it. And you can see Mopac beyond. There are a lot of details to explore in this plan, but first I'd like to give you a quick overview to reiterate some of what Garrett just said about some of the changes we've made in response to the community and the process over the past year. We'll hit these items and more again as we go through the plan in more detail, but here's a condensed list of the most relevant changes to the plan. We've increased parkland by over 26% from our original proposal and agreed to publicly dedicate the parks. We've reduced the total non-affordable residential unit cap by 12% to 1,335. We've capped office at 225,000 square feet, a 35% reduction from our original proposal. We've restricted retail by not allowing large single users, placing a 15,000 square foot total cap on bar uses, and capping total retail at 158,000 square feet. We've added a minimum 50-foot wide greenbelt connecting Bull Creek Road to the Signature Park along the north boundary of the site. We've committed to build a pedestrian bridge across Shoal Creek. We've committed to an incredible list of multimodal improvements in and around the project and an additional $100,000 in seed funding for neighborhood-driven projects beyond what we're building. We've agreed to dedicate Jackson Avenue as a public right-of-way and provide bike lanes on that road. We've delivered on the promise of affordable housing and are proposing 180 long-term affordable units on the site. We've reduced the number of larger detached homes within the project by 60% and replaced them with smaller, more moderately priced alternatives. We've increased compatibility restrictions on all edges of the project, and we've agreed to substantial additional environmental protections for Shoal Creek and the site's heritage trees. But what you'll also see as I go through the presentation is that there is a lot that hasn't changed. We are still committed to a high-quality mixed-use environment with neighborhood-scale retail and a diverse housing options. We are still committed to fully funding and constructing the traffic improvements that fix traffic around the project so it is better after the Grove than it is today. We're still committed to fully funding the construction and long-term maintenance of the site's incredible, extensive public park system. And we're still bound by a strict set of design guidelines that ensure a high-quality, pedestrian-oriented environment within the Grove. Now, before we dig into the master plan in detail, I'd also like to give you a very brief overview of the feedback process that has brought us to the updated master plan I'm presenting today. We've sought extensive feedback from well over 50 meetings, as Garrett mentioned, with various neighborhood groups. Too many to review all of them in detail, of course, but I would like to hit a few highlights. The feedback loop began with, I seem to have lost my presentation. Oh, there we go. The feedback loop began with your comments and questions when last we presented the master plan in July, and continued just a few days later with Grove Fest, where we walked the site with the neighborhood to look at how the elements like the park, the plaza, and the pond would integrate into the site. We hosted a residential design meeting where we heard a demand for housing diversity, smaller homes and apartments that can keep costs more moderate in an increasingly expensive part of Austin. We also heard demands to integrate affordable housing into the market rate housing and to provide green spaces throughout the residential district. A bicycle design meeting led to calls for better connectivity from the north and from the east, reduction of bicycle vehicular conflicts, and more bicycle amenities throughout the project. The new bridge over Shoal Creek is just the most visible of the many updates to the master plan based on that feedback. We hosted a meeting to focus on the design of the signature park and conducted a detailed survey, with the results of which will be posted along with this presentation in the coming days. Some of the general themes from that survey included a desire for an overall natural character within the park, the need for substantial space for active play, for play areas that are creatively designed to improve engagement with the natural world, for parking to be pulled out of the park and addressed elsewhere within the project, and for sensitivity to the site's trees and Shoal Creek. And I think you'll see this feedback clearly reflected in the plans we present today as well. We've had multiple meetings with organized community groups. With Friends of the Grove, we were asked to ensure that there's a mix of uses in the project and diverse housing options, to connect the Shoal Creek Trail and provide multimodal improvements, to study innovative alternatives for stormwater management, and to improve park integration without increasing the park's footprint. Finally, they asked us to ensure that the dialogue between the development team and you, the community, continues long after the master plan is complete through development and construction of the project. We've also had many ongoing meetings with the Bull Creek Road Coalition. These meetings have focused on traffic and intensity, and BCRC has requested that traffic be fully mitigated, that the commercial components of the project, office and retail, be reduced, that compatibility be improved along the edges, that park acreage be increased, that drainage impacts be addressed, that affordable housing be included, and that our engagement also continue with them through the life cycle of the project. At the same time, we've been holding extensive meetings with city staff in all departments: zoning, environmental, traffic, parks, heritage trees, drainage, and others. The dialogue has led to agreements on development limitations, increased parkland commitments, connectivity improvements, environmental measures, and the development of a detailed set of design guidelines for the project. And of course, we've been talking to experts in the real estate industry as well. What we've learned is that neighborhood scale retail is supported by this site. Regional scale retail really is not. Office will help support the retail and improve the viability of the structured parking. And with residential, we've learned that there is market demand across a wide range of price brackets and product types, which will enable us to create the greater housing diversity that we've heard so many requests for. So with that background, let's return to the updated master plan, shown here in plan view. I'll just orient you quickly. That's 45th Street on the north edge, Bull Creek Road running along the west edge, Shoal Creek over here on the east, and here Jackson Avenue comes up and through the project. I'm going to present this master plan to you using 5 key themes of the project: a vibrant and viable mixed-use plan, appropriately scaled, walkable, and well integrated with the park and residential district; a diverse community of housing, mixed and integrated to increase the range of ages, life stages, and economic means that will call the Grove home; connectivity to and through, with an emphasis on travel by foot and bicycle; green spaces, big and small, with pocket parks and green belts throughout, and a world-class signature park at the core; and innovative environmental measures to protect the site's critical resources, especially the heritage trees in Shoal Creek. We'll start by reviewing the mixed-use district. The heart of the Grove, centered around the retail Main Street and plaza, surrounded by local shops and restaurants, with workplaces, apartments, condominiums, and affordable living units occupying the floors above. We've refined the plan to create smaller, more walkable blocks, to disaggregate the parking into more user-friendly garages, to reduce surface parking throughout the district, and to better integrate the neighborhood grocer into the Main Street environment. This is the proposed location for the grocery here. We've also worked in response to feedback to create a stronger connection between the retail district and the signature park, and a unified public realm in this area, which I'll come back to later when I talk about the park. This new rendering shows the character we envision for that retail Main Street. and you can see the plaza and the park in the distance. This is a good place to mention the project design guidelines, which will dictate the wide sidewalks, street trees, pedestrian-oriented ground floor uses, and even the green infrastructure and the parklet that you see in this picture. These design guidelines are part of the zoning that we're requesting from the city. Compliance with these guidelines will be a requirement for any project to get permitted on this site. Now, great detailed design is still critical to realizing the vision that we have for the Grove at Shoal Creek. But these guidelines will ensure that at a minimum, we must create a well-scaled, shady, amenitized, and pedestrian-friendly environment at the Grove, not just on the retail main street, but throughout the project. I think a lot of people are pretty excited about the idea of having a great destination in their neighborhood, but I know there are also some concerns about the proposed mixed-use district, that it may be just too big or too intense. First, let's take a more detailed look at what is actually proposed within the mixed-use district in this master plan. I'll use this bird's eye view to give you a more accurate understanding of what the mixed-use district will be composed of. The master plan I'm presenting to you tonight consists of 150,000 square feet of retail, about 225,000 square feet of office, 700 residential units in the mixed-use district, including apartments and condominiums, both affordable and market rate. For context, the existing post-West Austin building across the street has about 329 units, so the entire mixed-use district is a little over double that number. And about 300,000 square feet of assisted living, that's about half the size of the existing Westminster facility at the corner of Jackson and Bull Creek Road. Now, generally, the message we've heard from various neighborhood groups is that housing is not really the issue. More housing choices are desperately needed in this part of Austin, and the proposal really is in scale with the uses across Bull Creek at Post and Westminster. The primary concern I've heard is with the scale of the commercial uses, the office and the retail. To make sure that everyone here fully understands the scale of what's proposed, what does 150,000 square feet of retail actually mean? Is that regional scale retail? Is that local scale retail? I'd like to use your own neighborhood to provide a little bit of context. This map shows a study area surrounding the Grove at Shoal Creek, bounded on the north by 45th, the west by Mopac, the south by 35th, and on the east by Shoal Creek itself. We've identified all the retail, shown in red, office shown in blue, multifamily shown in yellow-orange, assisted living in purple, and the state's vehicle maintenance facility shown here in gray. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me when I look at this plan is that the mixed-use buildings proposed at the Grove really are very similar in scale to the existing buildings along Bull Creek Road and Jackson Avenue. But let's zoom in a little bit further. A lot of you are probably familiar with this small mixed-use area I've highlighted here around Jefferson and Kirby Lane. This area alone contains about 115,000 square feet of retail. That is not quite the 150,000 square feet of retail proposed at the Grove, but it's about a neighborhood grocery store shy of that. This area also contains about 260,000 square feet of office, more than the maximum proposed at the Grove. And none of that office and very little of that retail has direct access to 35th Street. Overall, this area has 375,000 square feet of commercial uses, while the Grove's proposed zoning allows for a maximum of 382,000 square feet of retail and office. TxDOT's office buildings along Jackson Avenue provide additional context. Just the buildings pictured here north of 37th Street include about 275,000 square feet of office. Again, more than is the max proposed at the Grove. Overall, this study area contains almost 600,000 square feet of office, 120,000 square feet of retail, almost 600,000 square feet of assisted living, and over 700 residential units. Now, I'm definitely not trying to make the case that what we're proposing at the Grove is the same as what's in your neighborhood today. In fact, the last thing I want to convince you of is that the Grove will look like those office buildings on Jackson or be parked like Kirby Lane. The existing commercial uses in the area are surface parked. The Grove's commercial uses will be parked in parking garages, allowing us to stack housing above and preserving land for parks, open space, and high-quality streetscapes. What I hope this quick example does demonstrate is that you do already live in a mixed-use neighborhood, and that what we're proposing is not a big, scary regional power center or a major city hub, but a neighborhood-scaled commercial center that is consistent with the commercial uses that exist in your neighborhood today. The real difference is the Grove will be built to be walkable and pedestrian-oriented, to create great inviting places to live, work, and visit. and to fit into a smaller footprint in order to preserve large tracts of high-quality open space and to integrate more housing. The Grove will serve as the walkable center your mixed-use neighborhood lacks today, one that's centrally located, appropriately scaled, and carefully designed. Now let's take a closer look at the residential component of the Grove. One criticism we heard a lot about our last master plan was that there was too much land dedicated to the larger, more expensive single-family homes and not enough housing diversity. We've responded in our new master plan with a greater mix of housing, including 3 sizes of detached homes ranging from small cottages to typical single-family homes, duplexes along Bull Creek Road, townhomes in a variety of shapes and sizes, condominiums and stack flats, technical issues, here we go, apartments, affordable housing distributed amongst the market rate housing, accessory dwelling units, live-work units, and an assisted living facility, all coming together to create a truly diverse community of housing at the Grove. Let's compare this with our previous master plan. These yellow boxes on the previous plan represent the same kind of detached single-family homes you see on the east boundary of our new plan. I think the change is striking, a 60% reduction in the number of larger, more expensive homes, representing a strong shift towards a more diverse, inclusive housing solution at the Grove. This is a new rendering of the residential district that shows the quality and character we envision, a patchwork of housing types and landscapes, with alley loading to eliminate garages, narrow streets and on-street parking to calm traffic, integrated rain gardens to treat stormwater, generous sidewalks, porches, and green pockets around every corner. And we do remain attentive to how the Grove will impact its most immediate neighbors, with solutions on each edge that greatly exceed City of Austin required compatibility standards. On the north end, we responded to calls for more parkland and greenbelt connectivity with a 50-foot minimum greenbelt that will also serve to double city compatibility setbacks for the homes on 45th Street. Where the project neighbors Ridgely to the east, we're providing nearly identical detached residential uses. In fact, these are the largest footprint homes still proposed within the project to provide continuity for that established neighborhood. And despite the similarity of uses, we're still increasing the compatibility setback by 40%. And across Bull Creek Road, from Oakmont Heights, we've changed our proposal and are now proposing duplex buildings that are very similar in scale to what can and often is being built right there on the larger SF3 lots in Oakmont. And we're still setting them back from, behind a greenbelt and trail corridor. It's going to do this to me every couple minutes, I think. Let's try again. Uh-oh. All right, we're working again. The duplexes facing Oakmont are depicted here in this updated rendering. The solution is based on the outcome of a meeting we had with their neighborhood and goes beyond restricting the buildings facing Bull Creek to be duplexes. We're also proposing additional setbacks for height, height limitations, and architectural standards that will ensure more than compatibility, but a welcoming and appropriately scaled character that will greatly enhance this residential section of Bull Creek Road. The success of the walkable vision I laid out is largely contingent on connectivity and access, and especially multimodal connectivity. That means bikes, pedestrians, transit, etc. The graphic shows the extensive multimodal system proposed at the Grove. The blue lines represent the shared use paths, red lines are sidewalks, and yellow lines are bike lanes. Some key components of this include the green belts. Maybe it's increasing in its frequency. Here we go. In addition to the central green belt, we've added, as I mentioned earlier, a new green belt on the north edge of the property. This north green belt will provide better connectivity to the park, a much more friendly pedestrian alternative for east-west travel on 45th Street, park frontage for the existing homes on 45th, and a welcoming introduction to the project. There we go. From the intersection of 45th and Bull Creek Road. This image shows our vision for what the project will look like from that corner, with a small pocket park serving as an inviting front porch for the community and its extensive park system. Green streets remain a key component of the project, providing connectivity between, providing connectivity between Bull Creek Road and the Signature Park. One major refinement that came out of our bicycle design meeting was to eliminate all driveway or alley crossings of the Green Street trails to minimize potential conflict points. At the City of Austin's request, Jackson Avenue will extend through the Grove from Bull Creek Road to 45th Street as a public-owned city roadway. This section will feature bike lanes and generous sidewalks. At the north end, Jackson will intersect 45th Street with a right-in, right-out only intersection. As you can see here, cars will be forced to turn right when exiting the project. The street does not align with Chippewa and will not create through traffic onto that street. A pedestrian hybrid beacon at this location will provide for safe crossings for cyclists and pedestrians into Allendale. In addition to the shared use path on Bull Creek Road, we've also committed to provide a new protected bike lane on the southbound side of Bull Creek Road. On the east end of the project, the Shoal Creek Trail will connect to Ridgely on the south end to the Ridgely Greenbelt, providing direct access to the site from Ridgely. And on the north end, the project will connect to a new bridge over Shoal Creek. I think the desire for a pedestrian bridge has been mentioned in almost every public engagement we've had on this project, and we're really excited to be able to finally respond to that request. This is subject, of course, to the state of Texas granting an easement, but when that happens, the developer will fully fund and construct this bridge to provide direct access from Shoal Creek Boulevard to the Grove's many parks, restaurants, and amenities. Now, in the unlikely case that the city, neighborhoods, and the Grove all working together are still unable to secure the easement from the state, then the full cost of the bridge will still be dedicated to other pedestrian and bicycle improvements in the area. Other major multimodal improvements in the Grove include pedestrian hybrid beacons at 3 key locations to provide for safer crossings into the site, improved bus stops along Bull Creek Road, a location for a B-cycle station, car share parking, showers for office users, 400 bike parking spots, bike storage in multifamily buildings, and a commitment to provide $100,000 in seed money for additional neighborhood-driven improvements beyond the improvements included within this project. The next theme I'd like to address is the project's incredible park system. When we first came to you almost a year ago to present the master plan, we proposed a minimum of 16 total park acres. It's important to note that that acreage included 1.25 acres for the trail proposed along Bull Creek Road, which is still included in the plan today, but is no longer counted in our park acreage. So when you look at the total acreage added since that initial proposal, that 1.25 acres gets lost in the numbers. Today we're proposing 18.62 acres. That's a total increase of almost 4 acres, or about 4 football fields from our original proposal. Additionally, there are many elements of the open space system depicted here which are not actually a part of that 18.62 acre calculation, including the Bull Creek Road Trail, as I mentioned, many of the smaller pocket parks and garden courts in the residential district, and the extensive green space surrounding the parkside restaurants. These elements are still critical components of the Grove's open space system. What I'd primarily like to do tonight is to take a closer look at the signature park itself. What I'm showing you tonight is an initial outline for the park, and we look forward to continuing to develop and refine this initial concept with further input from the neighborhood and the city as the design process moves forward. I spoke to you before about how the park interfaces with the mixed-use district. While the parkside restaurants are not considered a part of the park from an acreage or a parkland perspective, we absolutely envision them as integrated complementary uses that engage with and provide additional ways to enjoy the park. The restaurants are set back to create an open, park-like environment along Jackson Avenue as it passes by the project, and they're oriented to frame a grand promenade which reaches from the plaza into the heart of the park. This is tying the urban to the natural and creating a unified public realm in this area. An active zone for the park, a little over an acre in size, will provide pavilions, gathering spaces, and a substantial creative playscape alongside a large deck which provides access to the shade of existing trees. A great lawn, about 2 acres in size, runs the length of the park and ties everything together. The northern portion of this lawn is wide and level, while the southern portion will slope gently down toward the pond. A portion of that lawn will also serve as a small amphitheater, a place for movies or small shows. This amphitheater is modest in size and is intended to serve the residents of the Grove and surrounding neighbors. It is not a regional destination. The wet pond itself will serve as the centerpiece of the park in many ways. The pond will serve as a visual amenity, a place to explore and learn, a wildlife habitat, and the centerpiece of the park's stormwater infrastructure. A network of boardwalks will provide opportunities to explore the water's surface. To the north, the park transitions to a more natural state under the huge existing oaks. We plan to integrate natural play features in this area, scattered picnic areas, and a small pavilion. This will be the shady, more peaceful region of the park. Moving further east, back up one more. Moving further east, the park becomes truly natural with footpaths down to the creek overlooks and even down to the creek bed itself for the more adventurous explorers. The Shoal Creek Trail will also wind through this portion of the site, and site-harvested wildflower seeds will be used to restore any disturbed areas in this part of the project. At about 1.5 acres, the neighborhood park will also play a critical role in the overall park system at the Grove, with a small playground to serve families, about a half-acre open lawn, and a native strolling garden under the trees that will provide passive recreation opportunities for all ages. The goal here is to get users old and young to come together in a single space. Lastly, I'd like to briefly address a few of the many environmental measures proposed at the Grove at Shoal Creek. While the wet pond is the centerpiece of the site stormwater infrastructure, it is also really just the last line of defense. Every roadway and green space throughout the project will integrate rain gardens and bioswales to treat stormwater right there at the source, improving water quality and increasing groundwater infiltration. This integrated approach, combined with the use of superior green infrastructure elements, will result in the highest standard of water quality for stormwater discharge from this site. The project will also provide additional protection to the critical riparian areas along Shoal Creek, and for a grove of live oaks that's among the most amazing that I've seen in Austin. For the oak trees in the signature grove, which is this key area of the park here, we've committed to not just protect the half critical root zone as required by the City of Austin's code, but to protect the full 3/4 critical root zone for these trees. This image here depicts that commitment. The left diagram shows the city code required minimum. These diagrams show what we've committed to provide at the Grove. Now, live oaks, especially healthy live oaks like these, are really tough organisms, and the city's 50% standard has been incredibly successful at protecting these trees. But these trees were special enough that we felt it was appropriate to go beyond reasonable doubt. We've also committed to plant hundreds of additional street trees beyond city minimum requirements and to provide a tree care plan for the existing heritage oak trees. Okay, well, I've covered a lot of ground, and I hope you're excited by what you've seen here tonight. I believe the Grove is going to be an incredible, memorable place that is cherished by the people who live, work, and visit here. In the plan I presented tonight, we've shown you substantial changes in response to the extensive feedback we've received, including parkland increases, density reductions, connectivity improvements, and improved affordability. We've also maintained our commitment to the core elements that we believe will make this project successful: a mix of uses, traffic that works, incredible parks, and high-quality design. Now, I know many of you have questions about some of what I just covered, and please write them down and save them for the end. We're on the home stretch now, but I do want to take just a minute to talk to you guys a little bit about traffic around the project. And for that, I'm going to introduce Brian Williams, the incredible engineer behind this project. Brian and his team have played a key role in understanding virtually every aspect of the infrastructure that will serve this project and the area around it, including the 24-inch water line being extended across MOPAC, the extensive stormwater infrastructure I just discussed, and of course the substantial improvements we're proposing to the traffic infrastructure around the project. So take it away, Brian.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Robert, for the very kind introduction. My name is Brian Williams, and I'm with Brown & Gay Engineers. I've been working on the Grove and engineering solutions for the Grove. This evening, I'm going to be talking to you about traffic. I'm going to be updating you with where we are on our traffic plan, as well as answering some of the most frequently asked questions that we get when it comes to Grove and traffic. So over the past year, we've been working on a solution for the impact that additional trips would have on Bull Creek. Now, our traffic study has grown to be about 400, I think it's 430 pages. It goes into great detail, intersection by intersection, driveway by driveway, on the mitigation measures that will be provided for the Grove. Now, like I mentioned, it's about 400 pages with a lot of exhibits, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details tonight, but what I am going to do is answer these three frequently asked questions. There are how many new vehicle trips are going to be on Bull Creek Road? how will the Grove impact traffic congestion at the intersection of 45th Street and Bull Creek Road? And finally, why should the community have confidence in the traffic study that we've done? All right, so how many trips are going to be on Bull Creek Road? Obviously, that is of great concern to the neighborhood, justifiably so. How many people have seen this graphic? Maybe floating around the last couple days, right? Okay, so in this graphic, you see, I like it because it's simple and easy to understand. So we're actually going to use this as the starting point and the ending point to answer this question. So the current traffic volume, it's shown right here on Bull Creek Road. It has the 7 cars. That represents 7,000 existing vehicles driving on Bull Creek Road. And then over to the right, you see a stack of vehicles, and that would represent the 7,000 vehicles currently on Bull Creek Road. And then if you were to do the counting there, that's another 19,000 vehicles. And that 19,000 number is gotten straight from our TIA in our traffic study. It is indicated that the Grove will generate 19,000 trips. However, I think the point of this graphic was to maybe insinuate that there's going to be 19,000 cars driving up and down Bull Creek Road, and our traffic study certainly does not indicate that. And let me go into more detail what I mean. All right, so Bull Creek Road. Bull Creek Road obviously runs north-south, Hancock to 35th Street. It's 40 feet wide, no parking on either side in the area of the Grove. So currently on the east side of Bull Creek Road, that's where the TxDOT office facility is, and that's going to be where the Grove is located. Now up here on the west side, you have a small area of single-family and duplex uses, and then transitioning to 2 apartment complexes. Then you have the Westminster site right there. And then south of Jackson, the road takes on a more residential feel. It's almost primarily single family with a few duplexes. So our site kind of mirrors the land uses across here as Robert described. Our more intense uses are up here in the mixed use district, transitioning to townhome, condo uses, and then single family as you move south. So this site plan, as I mentioned, we've studied 19,000 trips to be generated by this development. So let me just remind you what a trip is. A trip is a traffic engineering term for a vehicle entering or exiting a site. And so if you're driving down the street and you stop and get a cup of coffee, you pull in, that's a trip, and then you get your coffee and leave, that's a second trip. So by entering and exiting the coffee shop, you've created 2 trips. So where are vehicles going to be entering and exiting the Grove? Well, we have 5 driveways on Bull Creek Road. Now, most of the trips generated by the Grove are going to be generated in this more intense area. That's where, as Robert mentioned, the office, retail, multifamily, and restaurant uses will be. And therefore, most of the trips generated by the Grove are going to be using this portion of Bull Creek Road. For example, if a car was to come off 45th Street and want to use the commercial area, it's going to pull off 45th Street, come down here, pull into this driveway, use the site, and then exit back out. It's not driving from Hancock down to 35th Street on Bull Creek Road. Those 2 trips are only using this segment of Bull Creek Road, and that segment is going to be the area that sees the most increase in traffic. Now, as you transition further to the south on Bull Creek Road, the number of trips utilizing those segments will continue to decrease. By the time you get to this more residential area, the actual number of new vehicles driving on that section of road is a tiny fraction of the 19,000 that's mentioned in the traffic study. And I do want to point out here that Bull Creek Road right there it's not a 2-lane road. We're proposing significant improvements to Bull Creek Road that will take the number of lanes up to between 3 and 5 lanes in this segment, which are designed to handle the increase in traffic. So if you could move on to that next one. So in that first graphic I showed you, it showed the 19,000 total trips that are generated by the Grove, and you could think that maybe that's going to overwhelm Bull Creek. But let me provide a little more detail, segment by segment, how many vehicles are actually going to be driving on the road. So that more intense area that I described to you earlier between driveway 1 and 45th Street, that's the commercial segment, That section of Bull Creek Road is going to see the largest increase in traffic. In that portion of Bull Creek Road, we'll see approximately 12,000 additional vehicle trips. And again, that 12,000, that is a 24-hour, two-directional count. So that's less than 6,000 going north and less than 6,000 going south over a 24-hour period. Good. So south of the site, as I mentioned, the number of vehicles continue to decrease as you move down the street south of Jackson. Now, south of the site on Bull Creek Road, our traffic study, the 400-page document I said, shows that there will be 3,000 trips utilizing that segment of Bull Creek Road. And then, go ahead, north of 45th Street on Bull Creek Road, there'll be less than 1,000 new vehicle trips utilizing that segment of Bull Creek Road. And who are those vehicles? Where are they coming from? Really, most of those vehicles in our study are assumed to come from homeowners up in that area. Maybe instead of driving down Bull Creek Road, then down 45th to maybe use a business on, say Burnett or Lamar, now they're coming across the intersection, generating those trips, and then driving back through the intersection to their homes on Bull Creek north of the site. Good. And then also, our study has about 3,000 additional vehicle trips using Jackson Avenue to enter and exit the site. As Robert mentioned, Jackson Avenue is going to be extended up north through our site as a public street, and there'll be about 3,000 vehicle trips that utilize that point of access to enter and exit the Grove. So the next point I want to make: how will the Grove impact the intersection of 45th Street and Bull Creek Road? Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, a large percentage of the trips generated by the Grove are going to be using that intersection. So currently that intersection has 8 approach lanes. There's 2 in each direction, 2 north, south, east, and west. As you well know, right now there's no left turn lanes on 45th Street. This intersection has what's called split phase timing. Only one direction of traffic can go at a time. So right now, traffic coming from the east has some green time and then it stops. And then traffic from the west goes and then it stops, and so on. Now, our proposed improvements to this intersection include 4 additional lanes. You have 1 each direction, for a total of 2 left turn lanes on 45th Street and 2 additional lanes in the north direction. That's an increase of 50% in the number of lanes approaching the intersection. So what are those improvements going to do to your wait time? Well, right now at that intersection in the afternoon hour, the PM peak, each vehicle waits an average of 68.2 seconds, so slightly over a minute average. Obviously, the northbound direction's a little worse than some of the others, but on average, 68.2 seconds per vehicle. Now, by the year 2024, with just this incremental growth in traffic, more people are moving to Austin, and there's a small growth naturally in the amount of traffic on the streets. So with that incremental growth by the year 2024, that intersection in its current condition will have a wait time of 95.7 seconds. Now that is considered a level service F or failing by traffic standards. Obviously, when you're waiting a minute and a half at an intersection on average, you've got increased driver frustration. Drivers start looking for alternative routes. It's not a great situation. Yes, that's without the construction of the Grove, just to be clear. So 2024 comes around. All that existing traffic, all the natural background growth of traffic, plus the trips I just talked about being generated by the Grove. But with the improvements, the wait time will be 36.7 seconds per vehicle, and that's, again, that's the average wait time for a vehicle during the PM peak hour.
So if nothing's done by 2024, it's 95 seconds. If the improvements are made, all of the Grove traffic is placed on the intersection, it's 36 seconds.
Yes.
Any other major intersections in Austin that are 36 seconds?
Probably somewhere.
There's not a lot of them. That's a major benefit to the neighborhood as a whole overall as a result of the project. And we're committed to fully funding the improvements and building those improvements as soon as they get permitted by the city.
Thanks. So I want to go in more detail on that because it definitely probably sounds too good to be true for a lot of people, right? I said we're increasing traffic significantly at the intersection. It's already bad. How is it possible that it's going to get better? So as I mentioned earlier, by installing the left turn lanes on 45th Street, that eliminates the split face timing. Now instead of one direction of traffic going at a time, both east and westbound traffic can go through the intersection at the same time. This is a much more efficient intersection operation. So these numbers right here are the number of seconds the light is green for each lane. So just for example, in the westbound direction, currently each lane has 35 seconds of green time and 120-second signal cycle. Now with the improvements proposed by the Grove and the increased amount of green time because of the more efficient signal operation, you'll have 50 seconds of green time for each through lane, and you'll also have an additional 20 seconds of green time for the left turn lane that doesn't even exist now. So these numbers right here are the increase in green time that will be experienced through each signal cycle. In the northbound direction, because of the 2 additional lanes, each 120-second signal cycle time will have 84 additional seconds where the light will be green. Go on. So, no, that's good. So are we adding more vehicles to the intersection? Obviously, yes. As I mentioned, that's the segment of Bull Creek Road that's going to see the most traffic. We're adding 35% more studied vehicles to that intersection compared to what's going to be there already. However, as I mentioned earlier, we're adding 50% more lanes. Right now there's 8 approach lanes. We're adding 4. That's a 50% increase. And because of the more efficient signal operation, both east and westbound traffic moving at the same time, there's 78% more available green lane light time. So it's not magic, it's just a better intersection. There's going to be more green time and less red time. Okay, and finally, I hope y'all can follow with this point. So why should the community have confidence in the traffic study with the results that I just talked about? Well, there are some very conservative assumptions, specifically with trip generation, built into our traffic study. 2 examples. We have a very conservative, what's called internal capture reduction, and we also have a very conservative reduction for bike and pedestrian users. So just a reminder, I think we've talked about this before, but what is internal capture? Internal capture is a trip made between land uses on a mixed-use development. So it's somebody that's coming, maybe using the restaurant and using the retail. Those trips are happening between uses, but they never get on the roadway network outside the site. It's trips generated by the Grove, but they're not driving on Bull Creek Road, they're not driving on Jackson, they're not driving on 45th Street, they're not driving on any street besides maybe walking or driving across the Grove. So I use this example to try to illustrate a couple things. One, how trips are generated, and also internal capture. So this example right here, it's just going through somebody's everyday life, leaving home, dropping their kid off at school, going to work, going to lunch, grabbing some coffee, leaving work, going to dinner, getting home. So doing those events, I think probably most of y'all do that on average a day, if not more. Doing those events, that's 16 trips that one person experiences. Now in this example, my theoretical person works at the Grove, and that day they decided to eat at the Grove and grab coffee at the Grove. So in this situation, there's technically 10 trips generated by the Grove. However, 8 of those trips are what we call internal capture, and they never leave the site. So a more relevant example of internal capture would be maybe one of y'all in the audience that lives in the neighborhood. You know, you come to the site, use the restaurant, maybe stop at the grocery store before you head back home. Those are trips between different land uses that never leave the site. So obviously, everybody that works at the Grove isn't going to eat at the Grove every day for lunch, isn't going to get coffee at the Grove every day for lunch. And when you come to the site, sometimes you're just going to come grab groceries, or maybe just come and eat at the restaurant and not use multiple uses. So how is internal capture calculated? Well, there's been a group of transportation engineers have put together a method for calculating the internal capture on mixed-use developments. It's called Trip Generation Handbook. It's the golden standard for traffic engineering, and it's the 3rd edition, Chapter 6. That chapter is simply titled Trip Generation for Mixed-Use Developments, pretty self-explanatory. If you follow the methodology explained in that chapter for the Grove, the office, the retail, the residential, they all work well together and have a lot of internal capture. If you follow the methodology in the morning, the internal capture would be about 23%. In the afternoon, it would be about 34%. So let's contrast that with what we studied as part of our traffic analysis. So, go ahead. So in our traffic analysis, in the AM, we used less than 1% internal capture.
Who gives us the internal capture numbers?
Well, it's dictated by the point in the process when you meet with the city and they set the terms of the scope of your study.
So the city provided us the internal capture numbers of 1% and in the AM and 7.5% in the PM.
Yeah, that's correct,
And
right?
the industry standard indicates internal capture rates for mixed-use projects at 23 and 34%.
That's correct, yeah. And so that 1% in the AM, it represents roughly 5 individual users of the coffee shop, and that's it. So it's 5 people is the estimated internal capture that we've considered in our traffic study. So
5 people from the residential portion of the project that live there might actually go to the coffee shop in the morning. Everyone else is coming from somewhere else.
no, it's actually a little different than that. It's not just 5 people that live there. It'd be 5 people that are either work in some of the shops or work in the office or are leaving their residential stuff.
5
It's
of everyone.
5 of everybody.
Touching the site, not
That-
even just the residents.
That's correct, right?
So it's more than that. So there's less credit being given for the reduction than the industry standard and industry norm would require. And in straight numbers, there's 5 people that might actually use a common use within the project in that AM peak hour.
That's what our traffic study assumes, yes. So this is when I say there's some conservative assumptions baked in. The first one is the internal capture reduction. The second one, if you go to the next slide, Robert detailed the pedestrian and bike improvements. Obviously, there's going to be millions of dollars spent on these improvements, significant planning and engineering. There's a huge commitment to bike and pedestrian connectivity for this site. We hope everybody in this room, if you desire, can walk or ride their bike to this site. Now, kind of the best available data, I think the city website shows about 5.2% of the people right in this area use bikes to get to work and as their mode of transport. So it's about 5% of trips in this area use bicycles. And we certainly hope that that percentage is much higher with the connectivity we're providing. On top of that, near the site, within just a quarter mile, studies show people are more than willing to walk a quarter mile to a destination. And so at a quarter mile, there's about 1,500 housing units in that location. That represents, I don't know, maybe 3,000 individual people that will be excellent candidates for somebody that would be willing to walk to the Grove. So between 5% bike users plus however many pedestrian users of the site, being very conservative, we would say that there should be a 5% reduction to the number of trips generated by the site for bike and pedestrian users. However, in our traffic study, again, another conservative measure, we assumed 1.5% reduction for bike and ped users. And just to be clear, this reduction I'm talking about, there's a raw number of trips assumed for this site, and obviously bike and pedestrian users are not using the road network, so those users are subtracted from the total, and then you start analyzing intersections and road capacity. So instead of at least a 5% reduction, we were designing everything with the 1.5% reduction. So as I mentioned earlier, the 19,000 trip number is in our TIA, but really when you remove the TxDOT offices that are currently there and those vehicles that won't be coming and going to that site, the actual number of net studied new vehicles in our traffic study is 18,562. That number does not include the internal capture rates that the traffic handbook would recommend, and it also underestimates the number of bike and pedestrian users of the site. Now, if you were to use the traffic standard the handbook and their method for calculating internal capture for the site, and also a more reasonable 5% reduction for bike and ped users, you would end up with 12,300 trips to be the estimated trips generated by the site. Now that represents a 50% overestimation in trips generated by the site. So when I say, maybe why can you have confidence in the findings of the TIA? And it's because there's a lot of conservative assumptions baked into the bottom line numbers of the traffic study. When I talked about the roadway capacity, the performance of the intersection, all that is based on the 18,562 number and not the 12,300 number.
So let me just jump in real fast. I know the information is dense and abstract in terms of a sort of normal understanding, but there's some critical concepts that I want to draw out. One of the critical concepts is the gradient of traffic that's going to exist on Bull Creek Road. Up north near the intersection at 45th and Bull Creek, there's going to be an increase in traffic there. That's why we're increasing the number of lanes. That's why we're making the changes that we're making to the intersection of 45th and Bull Creek Road. And as you move south along Bull Creek Road, the number of trips reduces, and it reduces dramatically because people are driving into the site and they're using the site, and then they're exiting the site and they're going back through that intersection, the intersection that's well improved, that's going to be well executed. So that's one of the critical concepts that I wanted to point out for you. The other thing is you should be able to have confidence in the traffic impact analysis because it dramatically overestimates the traffic that's going to be generated by the project. It's not a small amount. It's a dramatic overestimation. We do already have a problem. In fact, that's exactly what we're showing on the screen right there. You have a problem. It's a 68-second problem on average. And if you do nothing, it's going to turn into a 96-second problem on average. And if we go in, add all of our traffic, and make our improvements, it's going to turn into a 36-second wait. And that's ultimately the point. And if you were to use real trip generation numbers from the site, the impact is dramatic. It might even be an A. So our goal, and we're going to own the project long term, our goal is to make sure that the traffic works, and it works incredibly well. You guys don't want bad traffic, and we can't afford bad traffic, because if we have a project that has bad traffic, it won't perform well. And so our interests are very much aligned on that topic. I think that at this point, Brian, do you have anything else to go through?
Yeah, I do. Just real quick, I was just going to summarize. Can you go to the next slide, Kate? Thank you. Yeah, I just want to summarize what I've talked about this evening. Again, a majority of Grove traffic is only going to use the 3 to 5 lane segment north of Jackson. What makes you say that? Well, as I said earlier, that's where the more intense uses are going to be, and based on the traffic, hey, there'll be some question and answer time.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just holding your questions for a couple more minutes.
So, so if you saw a graphic with the 19,000 trips, and we're concerned about those 19,000 vehicles being in front of your home, that's just not going to be the case. As I mentioned, south of the Grove, there'll be about 3,000 vehicles over a 24-hour period. And north of the Grove on Bull Creek Road, there'll be less than 1,000 vehicle trips on that segment of Bull Creek Road. The 45th and Bull Creek intersection is going to be less congested because of the improvements that we're making. And finally, there can be confidence in the study because it's based on conservative assumptions. And of course, I will answer questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, so a couple of things. We're going to go into the Q&A session of this. We're going to go. Do I have a volunteer or two from the audience to help us organize the cards? Anyone? I got Sam. Okay, we've got a volunteer right here, Jason. Thank you very much for volunteering. Okay, while they're starting to get those organized together so that we can deal with them kind of in a topical format, I wanted to mention a couple of things to you. First off, we're going to post on the website some results from the Parkland Planning Charrette that we did Please feel free to take a look at that. The results talk about the different types of uses that can be seen and people wanted to see within the park area. The other thing that we're going to be posting on the website is some traffic simulation videos. So early next week, we'll post 2 videos showing traffic simulations for the traffic around the project on the website. The videos show the results of a traffic simulation software that runs traffic models. They've been requested by a member of the neighborhood, and in candor, we've been reluctant to provide that information because the software requested to be released has a high probability for misuse. It's one of many tools that's used to evaluate intersection and road performance, and it can be easily misunderstood and abused. In short, it's not just a pretty picture that shows how traffic will function. It's a random scenario generator that simulates various potential events to see what the traffic impact of those events will be on any given place. So we're going to post those in the interest of being candid with everybody to the website, and you can take a look at them and ask any questions that you may have at that time. Our intention was to have them here for you tonight, just kind of set up in the back of the room. They have to run, and so you gotta really want to watch them in order to see it. But we had some technical issues with that. So I'm going to go over and start grabbing questions and start answering those here in just a little bit. Thank you.